This morning, as we consider this Advent theme and continue the series that we're in, we're looking especially at these two verses. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. Dear congregation of our Lord Jesus Christ, our world today faces many crises in leadership. There are countless leaders that abuse their place. It happens out there in the world, in the realm of politics and political leaders, but it happens as well within the church and with church leaders. Let's take a moment to reflect on some issues pertaining to leadership trust and breach of trust. There have been a lot of political leaders who have been involved in scandals, who have acted in self-serving ways, who've compromised ethical boundaries and misused public funds. In recent years, the news has often been filled with reports of political leaders or bankers or investment managers, people in other positions of authority that have misused the trust placed in them. And as I prepared for this message over the last few weeks, I paid special attention to items in the news that pertain to scandals in leadership. The news is filled with it. From the mayor's office in Toronto to the Senate in Ottawa, daily in the news, to all kinds of other issues. Other political leaders, other positions of authority, and also, sadly, leaders in the church who have misused members of the flock. The results of that, of course, are horrific. Here's an illustration of a misuse of trust. I remember reading that after 9/11, where 380 firefighters and police officers lost their life going into the Twin Towers to try to rescue people. After all of that happened, and in the aftermath of that, they set up a support system in which firefighters would be a support to families where the husband, the father, was lost in that tragedy. So it was kind of like firefighters being shepherds to families who had lost a husband, a father. Within a year, in at least a dozen of those cases, the support firefighter left his own wife and family in an affair with the person and family that he was supposed to be supporting. And we look at that and we say, it's awful. It's a scandal. It's self-serving. It's selfish. It's not the way that life ought to be. In a sense, that's what we're facing in Ezekiel with the shepherds of Judah in Ezekiel's day. 600 years before the coming of Christ. Life has deteriorated in Judah. And there's a scathing criticism of the leaders of Judah, the shepherds of the people. We saw last week that God came in Ezekiel's day and he says, I long to see a man who can stand in the gap. I'm looking for a leader of justice. I'm looking for someone who can intervene. I'm looking for a mediator. There was no one to be found. And this chapter continues that theme of indictment of the leaders of Judah. The shepherds of the people were not shepherding the flock with justice and with integrity, but they were being self-serving in their positions. And now we have to realize that when Ezekiel is talking about the shepherds of Israel or the shepherds of Judah, that's a figure of speech. He's talking about the kings. He's talking about the prophets. He's talking about the priests. He's talking about the princes of the people. He's talking about people in leadership positions who should have been counseling and guiding and steering the people in paths of righteousness to live in a close, committed relationship with God. The spiritual nurturers, the teachers of the people, all of those who were entrusted with special privilege of leadership among God's people. And they weren't taking that responsibility seriously, but they were self-serving. Here's a cartoon that shows there are good shepherds and there are bad shepherds. And here we see the good shepherd who goes out to find the sheep who are lost or hurt. And here we have the bad shepherds who are living on the backs of the sheep and enjoying the luxuries of life. And God comes through Ezekiel and says, that's not the way it's meant to be. God says, in essence, I have not put you in those positions to misuse the flock, but to guide them. And the consequences of that scandalous leadership are crippling. The consequences in Israel is that the people were not being nurtured in ways of truth and righteousness. They were being misled. They were not living in that covenant relationship where God says, you'll be a holy people. You'll be my people and you will love me and I will protect you and I will surround you with my love and my blessings and my grace and you will thrive. We're not the holy nation that God was looking for. Did you know we need to realize that there is in our lives today also a crippling consequence when there are scandals of leadership. Not only when we lose our trust in political leaders, but think of what happens in the life of the church when there's a misuse of leadership position and authority. When the spiritual leaders of the church fail, and they don't live for the well-being of the congregation, and they don't live for God's honor, they don't live for God's glory, they don't accept standards of obedience. It affects the relationship between leaders and people. But it also affects, oftentimes subconsciously, it affects the relationship of people to God. This is often what happens. It creates a sense of bitterness. It creates a sense of disillusion. It creates a reaction of, well then, who can we trust today? And that reflects on the church. And it reflects on the relationship of the church even to God. If that's the church. If that's the leadership of the church, if that's the way people are going to be, then than who needs it. And people at times turn their back on God because of the mistakes of leadership within the church. And God sees the tragedy of that. And God sends his healing love in Jesus, the Good Shepherd. God sees a nation that is longing to be healed. God sees a people that long to walk in fellowship with him and to love him and to be restored in righteousness. And God recognizes the failures of the human leaders and sees that his people need more. And so God sends Jesus, the Good Shepherd. And notice how Jesus understands his own call and his own ministry. He says in Luke 4, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus recognizes that he's called to be a good shepherd. Jesus is called by God to provide leadership of integrity, leadership of honesty, leadership of compassion. Jesus is compelled to go out and to heal, to minister to the wounded, and to encourage the discouraged. There's life-changing implications with Jesus as the Good Shepherd. Here's a leader that deserves to be followed. Here's a leader that can be trusted. Here is a leader that will live sacrificially. Here's a leader that will lay down his life for his people, for his sheep, his flock. And those who would be followers of Christ are called to live similarly. Peter says to the elders among you, "I appeal as a fellow elder and as a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that's under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be." The message continues to the elders, "Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away." I'm going to use an illustration to show the difference between a leader that is a leader of integrity and a situation of deception. Jesus was a leader of complete integrity in his life and in his death. There was no hiding the reality. In 1976, Chairman Mao Zedong of China passed away. The authorities, the leaders of the Politburo of China, demanded that his body be embalmed and preserved in such a way that his body would never, ever decay. This was to be an embalming forever. The doctor protested the demands of the authorities, but they insisted to embalm in such a way that his body would never decay. And the story gets a little bit gruesome. They pumped 22 liters of formaldehyde into his body. And his body began to swell. And the formaldehyde came out of the pores of his body. His whole body ballooned. The doctors worked feverishly to try to recreate some semblance of what Mao Zedong had looked like before. And then the authorities said, "Make a waxwork dummy." And by the time that hundreds of thousands of people filed back past the coffin in Tiananmen Square. Even the doctors didn't know what the people were really looking at. There was a massive scheme to deceive the people. Jesus isn't that way. Jesus came, and he was who he said he was. And there was no hiding the truth. And there was no deception. There was no misleading. He simply came to be the shepherd of his people and to lay down his life for the flock. He did it willingly. He did it graciously. He did it for you and for me. Do you know, it's remarkable. And if I can continue the illustration from 9/11 and the Twin Towers for a moment, the firemen and the police and others went into the towers. They knew that in the line of duty, there was a possibility that they might die. And they went willingly. For that, we need to give them credit. What amazing courage. What a sense of duty. What a sense of self-sacrifice to walk into a situation like that, knowing the realistic reality that you might die in the course of duty. Now think of Jesus. When he came in the course of duty, didn't come with the reality that he might die. He knew that he must. He didn't come with the possibility. He came with the reality that inevitably he would die. He would lay down his life for the flock. He would sacrifice himself for the sheep. And then he calls his followers and he says, "Come, live like that." The Bible gives us no excuse for rejecting God because of the leaders of the people. We're called to look at Jesus. We're not asked to look at the mistakes and the failures of others and other leaders and use that as a reason to say, well, I won't be involved with God and I won't trust God. God says, just look at the Savior. Look at your shepherd. Look at the one who laid down his life for the sheep. And everyone who follows Jesus has a shepherd role. We saw in 1 Peter chapter 5 that the elders are called to be shepherds of the people, to follow the chief shepherd. It's not just the elders officially appointed. Deacons are shepherds of the people as well. They too nurture God's flock. Pastoral care workers are shepherds of the people. But so are Sunday school teachers. And catechism teachers are shepherds of the flock as well. And those who care for each other are also shepherds. Parents, Christian parents, are called to be shepherds of the children that are brought into their home. And grandparents are the shepherds of their grandchildren. Friends, Christian friends, are called to be shepherds of each other. Did you get the picture? Pretty quickly, if we're followers of Jesus Christ, each and every one of us is the shepherd. This is not just about the minister. It's not just about the elders. It's about all of us as members of the flock. It's about all of us under the care of Jesus, and it's about all of us extending as good shepherds love to each other, not taking advantage of each other, not using and abusing each other, not misusing each other's trust. It's about being good shepherds to each other. And so as we make this application to our lives, we've seen Jesus inspires leaders to be his followers. We have seen that there's no excuse for rejecting God. Jesus is our good shepherd, and he calls us and he says, "Come and receive my healing love." We've seen that everyone who follows Jesus has a shepherd's role. And in our Advent embrace of the Good Shepherd, think about that and put that into practice in your life this week. This means very significantly, give God special thanks that after decades and centuries and millennia of leadership failure, of inadequate leaders, Jesus came, the perfect shepherd. Give God profound thanks for the new outlook on life that comes through the good shepherd who teaches the better way. And as you embrace that good shepherd this Advent season, ask yourself, what does this imply for me as a shepherd in his footsteps? In whatever your role, whether you're an elder or a deacon, a pastoral care worker, a leader of one of the groups of the church, a teacher, a parent, or a grandparent, a brother, a sister, a friend, in whatever role, what are you doing to be a good shepherd to those around you? Let's pray together. Dear Father, the world is a dark place when leaders can't be trusted. The world is a sad place when leaders get off track and become self-centered and self-serving. And Father, we recognize this not, first of all, to point a finger at others, not to shame and blame others, but we recognize this because it gives us a profound sense of the significance of Jesus, the perfect leader. Thank you for a compassionate shepherd. Thank you for the Savior that we can turn to, knowing that he will never misuse our faith and trust as we hear his voice. Father, thank you for teaching us the better way. And Lord, we pray this morning that you will help each of us to ask, not who can be a better shepherd to me, but how can I be a better shepherd to others? Father, thank you for the privilege that you give to each one of us to be your sheep and to be shepherds to each other. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.